Let's talk about Hush, a 2016 Apple commercial. Sorry, horror film which centres around a remote house in the woods. Our protagonist for this one is Maddie, played by Kate Siegel, who retreats to a remote cottage to write a novel, only to be stalked by a masked psychopath.
Yeah, ultimately it's a film about a deaf woman, isn't it? So she was 13 and got meningitis, and that led to her losing her hearing, right?
Oh, yes it is, yes, I remember
so she
now,
got to 13, lost her hearing. There's a quote by Helen Keller, which is actually really bang on about blindness and deafness, and it says, blindness separates us from things, but deafness separates us from people. I thought that was very, very poignant for this film. I've got no other point around that. I thought it made me sound intelligent, to be honest with you.
That was actually beautiful.
It was. Thanks, Helen. You've really salvaged this review, haven't you? Thanks, love.
We find out very quickly in the film that Maddie is actually fully deaf, and the way that it's introduced to us is through sort of a tool that's used quite often these days in cinema. It sounds like an underwater effect, doesn't it? And that's actually used for some of you who've watched Dharma. It gets turned on and off, and it kind of shows the balance between what it's like to be somebody who's deaf and what the side characters are hearing. So I thought it was quite an interesting technique that they use to differentiate. So yeah, I think you immediately kind of realise the struggles that Maddie was going through within the film, and it made you sort of associate with her a little bit more, which kind of makes the later events of the film a lot more impactful.
Her next door neighbour gets murdered like immediately, right, by some guy. But surely when that murder happens, when you lose one sense, the other sense is typically heightened, right? So surely her peripheral vision would be better than just an average person, or if not just the same level at the very least, because that murder happens for a very long time and she doesn't even look once. It's right next to her. She doesn't notice any kind of movement. He even comes in the house by opening a door in the middle of the night, and she's just wearing some little vest thing. Surely she'd feel the cold. Like, going deaf doesn't stop you sensing temperature.
One of the scenes that kind of sets the threshold for what she can sense is there's like a burglar alarm or something that flashes around, doesn't it? And she says like she can feel like the vibrations of that, and that's what that'll wake her up if there's a house fire or something.
Not the fucking strobe lighting of it. It's the vibration.
But yeah, I do agree with you how there's a few sort of inconsistencies, particularly with the first meeting of Maddie and the antagonist, with the fact that our neighbour is sort of getting rattled up against a door over and over again for about 5 minutes. I thought it was a great Apple commercial, Stu.
Yeah?
The opening scene, you get a full frontal of the MacBook Air. That handoff functionality from iMessage to the Mac and back is absolutely mesmeric on the eyes. But yeah, I think Steve Jobs, he kept his money or probably took it to the grave in this one because it only had $1 million budget, which obviously went on the few Apple products that were clearly placed very strategically in this film. But it didn't take us too long to be offended in this one, Stu.
You are woke.
Well, she sent a message on her iPhone and it came up as a green bubble, which, made us feel a little bit uncomfortable for a second. But then it quickly changed to blue, so the film was salvageable from that point. But for a second, I thought we had an Android user on our hands.
Oh, and that would have ruined this film, wouldn't it? I mean, who wants people that use open source technology? Get with it.
But moving on from that, Stu, I rate this woman. She's a writer. I have an English degree myself. I have a strong connection with the written language. And she likes to withdraw into nature, doesn't she? She lives in the woods. She likes to stimulate her creative pathways as she's writing her next novel. I really like this film, Stu. I thought it was very good for the first 26 minutes. And then it sort of dropped off a cliff. The reason why is it took all of 26 minutes for them to demask the antagonist in this film, and I cannot stand it in horror films when they just reveal who it is immediately. As humans, we take social cues from facial expressions, don't we? And we feed off that and respond to it accordingly. So when you see this freaky mask that just had a neutral expression on it, it just creates this feeling of confusion in you, and it's pretty flippin' scary. So why did they just take that mask away from him straight away in the first instance that they meet, and he just looks like he rides tractors all day, the antagonist? It's absolutely stupid.
The mask seems entirely pointless, really, doesn't it, to begin with? Because if you're just going to take it off to kill her anyway, then why bother wearing a mask? Just don't wear it. Or keep it on because it's your thing, and you're just a shit Jason.
It looks really cool, and it's pretty scary, and I forgot how good the opening segment of it was, and then it's just terrible. As soon as you see his face, you're not interested anymore, because that level of threat, that unknown, is completely removed.
Yeah, I agree. I also struggled with some of the stupidity that comes in quite quickly in this film. Like, I don't think it's a bad film. I actually thought it was okay, but there's a lot of, like, stupidity in it. Like, he establishes really early on that she's deaf, but then continually goes around the house banging on all the windows to try and intimidate her. Or he could literally just break the windows and get in because she wouldn't be able to hear that he's fucking done it and is now in the house. For most of the film, he just hangs around outside.
Yeah. But he says, I can come in whenever I want, so he's just sort of enticing her, isn't he? He's trying to scare her.
It's a bit stupid, that, though, isn't it?
Yeah, he waits a bit too long, doesn't he? He's not in a hurry.
No.
I think The Mask, it's sort of classic slasher, isn't it? It's sort of inspired by Scream or Vacancy as well. Mm-hmm. But it's just such a shame that it's removed and it's gone. It's an afterthought, as you've said.
You don't think of the killer as a mask killer, do you? You just see him as like this average guy who just looks a bit bland. It looked like he'd serve you a coffee in Starbucks, didn't he?
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, I think it was quite violent at times.
It's aggressive, isn't it?
I think it's something that they missed out on in the film, because if they kept his mask on while he continued to be over the top in the way that he dispatched with people with a knife, they could have really made something brilliant here, but I think they just missed the mark, demasking him and then having him go around with the knife, because that first kill was, brilliant, but completely lost its effect after that.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of silly scenes, as you mentioned earlier, and daft choices, Maddie, she has like a flashing light, doesn't she, that she throws into the forest to distract the antagonist. Why does he just walk towards it like a dog? Surely you'd think it's a decoy. She throws it away from her and then runs into the forest. Like, how can you be that stupid?
Maybe he just likes a little rave.
Rave in the woods? But surely you'd think she might be using this as a distraction. I'm not going to run towards this flashing light, because realistically, is this flashing light going to be Maddie? Is it going to be this human that I'm trying to kill?
Well, he doesn't know. Maybe he's like, wants to kill her because he's like, she broke up with me and now I've heard that she has these flashing light abilities that she didn't tell me about. So I'm going to go kill her. But we do see her hand get absolutely mangled later on. That was quite good. It looked like Jeremy Beadle's little hand, didn't it?
It's a strong hand, isn't it?
Look at all what you got here.
It was strong hand. But again, I think like that brutality nature to it, I think was quite good. I think it was well played.
I mean, she's an absolute boss, really, isn't she? She's obviously got this disadvantage against somebody who's trying to kill her, and then the scene you've just described happens in the final act of the film, and it's where she sort of stands up to him after she's envisaged all the outcomes in each scenario. She decides to fight.
At the end, she just basically fucking John Wicks him, doesn't she? He goes to fucking stab her from the bathtub and her little spidey senses tingle in, and she just fucking slips him and she wins. Sexy.
Ninja-like.
The thing is, overall, I didn't think it was a bad film. Like, I genuinely think it was watchable. I didn't think it was particularly bad, but I think you're right. It was kind of stronger up front, and then there was a lot of, like, fluff in the middle, like him just outside, not really getting in, banging on windows, her trying to open a window and close it, and just, it was a bit bland in the middle, and it didn't really end very strongly, but I still don't feel it was an awful film.
No, I mean, the way that the film's set up in one location's my sort of forte, really. I love films that are static in one place and don't sort of shift all over the place all the time, and it kind of makes you think, how do I get out of this scenario? But in this film, the way it kind of played out, I didn't care after they took the mask off him, and I think that's kind of what, to sum up, that's what killed it for me.
Yeah, I just think it's bang average, isn't it?
I think probably one of the best comparisons I can make between the way this film panned out and ended versus a much better version is Hush versus how The Strangers did it. Mm-hmm. The Strangers, you never see them get demasked. The mystique around their identity, their motives is always there, and it's never revealed. And then right at the end of the film, the protagonists die, brutally murdered, and that's it. It's never revealed why they do it. There's no flipping balance. The antagonists are always in control. They never lose that assertiveness. That's the way to kind of finish a horror film, I think, where you want to break the mold and stamp your mark.
Yeah, I agree. I think it could have been better. I think the premise was fine. It just wasn't the most inspiring film that we've ever watched. Alright, is this the point where we just tell people to subscribe and then kind of fuck off really awkwardly?
Yeah.
Yeah, right then, well, just subscribe, yeah? Cool.